What's something that's been stolen and nothing like it exists anywhere else in the world? Meet the Zimbabwe bird, a messenger of spirits carved in stone. I am Joana, and today we uncover Africa's untold stories. When Europeans discovered Great Zimbabwe, they refused to believe Africans could have built it. To them, greatness could not grow in African soil, believing native Africans are incapable of constructing such a complex structure. The Great Zimbabwe ruins, built between the 11th and 14th century by the Joana people. These are stone walls rising without mortar. The ruins are the largest ancient stone construction in sub-Saharan Africa, and on its sacred enclosures sat soapstone birds, 16 inches tall, perched on 3-foot pedestals, 8 of them guardians of ancestors. In 1891, Cecil Rhodes sent a British explorer, James Theodore Bent, to excavate Great Zimbabwe. Bent didn't just dig, he took. From the sacred eastern enclosure, he removed bird number 4. That's the tallest and most detailed, distinguished by a panel of chevron carves at its chest. Was it just a sculpture or kind of spiritual sacred being? To the Joana people, it was sacred. To the colonizers, it was just a magnificent sculpture. So the name Zimbabwe bird or Great Zimbabwe bird is a colonial era label given by European explorers or archaeologists in the late 19th century to describe the soapstone sculptures found among the ruins. Now, each bird represents something divine. Various explanations have been proposed to interpret the symbolic meaning of the bird, but the one that stands out the most for me is that it represents sacred or totemic animals of the Joana, the Bataloi eagle, which was held to be a messenger from Wari, God. I don't know if I pronounced that well. And the ancestors, or the fish eagle, Hungwe, which it has been suggested was the original totem of the Joana people. So to take it, it's not just theft of art, it was also the theft of meaning. Now let's talk about bird number 4. The one Bent stole. Bird number 4, the most detailed one, tall, detailed, often called the Bent bird or the Rhodes bird, because Bent removed it for Cecil Rhodes. You see how things are rebranded to confuse the future generation and legitimate theft? Now, it stood 1.745 meters tall, plumage marked by parallel oblique lines, wings carved to meet in a diamond at its back, tail pointed like a spear, the eyes marked with raised bosses. So every line and incision was sacred. But when he left Africa, the story of the birds twisted. Bent sent the originals to Cape Town, and soon after, replicas began to appear. He later sold his bird to Cecil Rhodes, who mounted it in the library of his Cape Town house and decorated the whole house stairway with wooden replicas of this bird. Rhodes has had stone replicas made 3 times the size of the original one to decorate the gate of his house in England near Cambridge. It was as if he was so in love with this bird that he kept making replicas. In 1930, the British Museum made a cast out of the bird. This one in plaster, painted grey to mimic the soapstone, measures about 1.82 meters with the base. This replica cast is displayed in the London exhibition called Lone Exhibition of Antiquities from Zimbabwe and other ancient sites in Rhodesia. Mind you, these are replicas. This is not the original. Now think about an exhibition where colonizers display what they stole and then made copies of their theft to show the world how scientific their stealing was, right? This is a journey of all 8 birds family. First bird was removed. Now, it's not just about bird number 4. There were actually 8 birds in this collection. The first bird, removed 1889, right, by the European hunter Will Posser, sold to Cecil Rhodes, who placed it at his Cape Town residence. That's still in South Africa. It's not yet returned to Zimbabwe. The second bird was taken during Bent's excavation. It's a smaller size, partially damaged, originally sent to Cape Town Museum, but now it has been returned to Zimbabwe. The third bird was removed by Bent's team as well, carved with distinct diamond pattern wings, was in Cape Town Museum, has been repatriated to Zimbabwe. Now the fourth bird, the tallest, the most detailed, removed by Bent as well from the sacred eastern enclosure, has chevron markings on the chest and a chipped beak, sent to Cape Town. This was made by the British for the British Museum, so they made literally a copy out of it. So this is like you fake the work of an artist without their consent. The original bird has been returned, but the cast is in London. Fifth bird. So the fifth bird was found broken. The head and the pedestal were separated, and the head was sent to Germany, the Ethnological Museum in Berlin, while the pedestal stayed in Africa. Later, they reunited and it was returned to Zimbabwe, but this was in 2003, right? So what do you think the Germans would have even just done with the head alone? So it was not worth keeping, right? And the sixth bird, shorter, broader, also from the eastern enclosure, was returned from South Africa to Zimbabwe, also in 1981. Then the seventh bird was fragmented when it was found, restored later, also returned. The eighth bird is the smallest of the set, possibly from a different enclosure. Some debate that. Left Cape Town back to Zimbabwe. So in 1981, most of the birds were returned back to Zimbabwe. Now, in the British Museum archives, this bird is labeled CSR.73, classified as cast sculpture, a lifeless imitation of the sacred thing. Now, the narrative of exactly who removed which bird and when is still questionable. One account says the first bird was hacked off by European hunter Will Posset in 1899 and sold to Rhodes, then Bent removed the other birds. Well, whatever. Their mission to prove that Great Zimbabwe bird bird could not be African. They believed that everything majestic must have come from somewhere else. So Bent took the birds and Rhodes displayed them. For nearly a century, these sacred birds sat in foreign museums, some in Cape Town, in Berlin, and then in England. One even ended up in the hands of a missionary, split into two, with the head in Africa and the pedestal in Europe, that one that went to Germany. So now imagine a bird that was carved to watch over ancestors, now watching strangers just walk past in silence, disconnected from its heritage and history. History turns. In 1981, a year after Zimbabwe gained independence, 4 of the birds returned home, and South African government exchanged them for a collection of unique bees, wasps, and ants. Yes, insects for ancestors. I don't know how unique they are, but it is quite an improvement, and very different from the British, who would rather offer colonial back to you, right? So you might wonder if this bird could possibly have more meaning other than how European colonizers who stole it called it and classified it well. Let's explore some of the possible meaning following the meaning of birds within many African cultures. While they weren't given human-style names, they embody sacred beings with known totemic or divine identities, like the hungwe, that's the African fish eagle, that carries a spiritual identity which somehow represents a royal totem among the Shona clans, associated with leadership, purity, and divine authority. Hungwe is seen as a messenger between humans and the creator, Ware. Chapungu, Bateleu eagle, carries a spiritual identity, a kind of guardian bird, known as the bringer of messages from the ancestors, often carved atop poles or walls to watch over sacred places. Ware's message, that's the god's message, carries a spiritual identity. In oral tradition, the bird stands as a medium between the ancestors and the god. The birds mark sacred ground and royal presence. So while they were not like named how we'll expect, right, or we don't know the real names, but if you do, if you come from Zimbabwe and you've heard the story and you know about this, write the names beneath because I want to know. But while we don't know that name right now, each bird represents a spirit form, a chapungu or a hungwe, which are sacred categories in Shona cosmology. Today, the Zimbabwe bird lives on the national flag, banknotes, coins, official seals. Replicas may sell for around $150, but to Zimbabweans, its worth is beyond price. And almost all the 8 original birds have found their way back home to Zimbabwe, with only one still remaining in South Africa, in Cape Town, with Cecil Rhodes. So however, the story is more complex. Some birds return, some parts not return, but we are so excited that at least this artifact found its way home. I am Joana, and that was Africa's untold story with some kind of happy ending.